This is going to be a talk from me, a current student in psychology. I am a third year in psychology, the pure psychology course in DCU. So this is just going to be me kind of going over what's in the course, what's in this course, what's in psychology and disruptive technologies. And if you have any questions after that, I will be happy to answer them. So yeah, this is really just a chance to kind of get to know a little bit about what the course is like. Any questions about psychology, whether in DC or not, that's fine as well. And also just learn a little bit more about DCU as well while you're at it. So it's a 4-year course, the main psychology thing. So I'm in third year of that and in the second semester right now, which is semester is the same thing as like a term in secondary school. It's like the second half. General kind of information about DCU. One of the main draws of the college is essentially that it has the highest rate in Ireland for their graduate employability rates within 12 months of the course completion, which is personally kind of the main reason that I was attracted to DCU, just because I knew I was going to college with the hope of getting a job after. And I knew that DCU would be a very good choice for me in that respect. So yeah. School of Psychology in DCU. So if you don't already know, there are 3 psychology courses that DCU offers. These are the BSc in Psychology, the BSc in Psychology and Mathematics, and the BSc in Psychology and Disruptive Technologies. I do the first one. And you may or may not be wondering why it's so important that we call it like a BSc as opposed to a BA. And essentially the reason behind that is in DCU, we classify psychology as a science, which I personally believe that is what it is. Other colleges would maybe call it an arts. This doesn't necessarily hugely mean much for you in terms of employment or anything like that. A large part of what you study will also be the same. The main kind of distinction there is that in a BSc course, there may be a bit more of a research focus and kind of more statistical maths side to things. It's not too much, it's not too daunting if maths is not your strong suit or anything like that. It is just important to note there's just like a little bit more of a focus in a BSc course than in other BA kind of courses for psychology. So a brief little overview of the honours degree with PSI accreditation. What the PSI accreditation is, it's the Psychological Society of Ireland. And if you're looking at any kind of psychology undergraduate courses in Ireland, it's a good idea to check to see if it has this accreditation. Most of the undergraduate courses do. So don't necessarily wonder too much about it, but the vast majority of them do. It's not the end of the world if they don't, if you also really love a course but it doesn't have that. But it does just help your employment kind of prospects after. It essentially means that the Psychological Society of Ireland has looked at the course, said it kind of meets a lot of their criteria for what someone should have coming out of an undergraduate. And so you're just a little bit more likely to kind of get that employment out of that and be able to work in psychology fields maybe a little bit quicker. But that's not to say that other courses will not lead you down the same path, because they absolutely could. So the main kind of benefits of going to psychology in DCU are, first of all, that small class size. So if you go to some place like UCD, you could be in a lecture hall with 400 students, I don't know, a massive amount of students. In DCU, you're never going to have that really. The maximum intake for psychology in DCU is 40 students. So that's the maximum you could really have. If you're sharing a lecture with another course, you might have a bit more in one lecture, but for the most part, You're going to have a small class size. You're going to know the people in your course, know your group. That may be for you. That may not be for you. It's definitely something that I enjoy and I appreciate. So I think it's great being able to learn off your peers, do group research projects with people you actually know, and be able to work with them. As points, there is a minimum of an O4 or a H6 in maths, which is the only requirement for psychology in DCU, which is achievable for any of you if you put your mind to it. I'm absolutely positive of that. So yeah, it's a level 8 degree, one step below the master's, 4-year full-time. There is a huge range of modules, and that's one of the best things about psychology, is that it can kind of reflect anyone's interest. If you're kind of more into teaching and things, there's an educational psychology module where you learn about like child development and how to teach properly in the classroom. If sports is your thing, all about athlete performance, everything like that. There's sports psychology modules, there's business modules, there's crime modules, if like Criminal Minds is your favorite show ever, or you love listening to crime podcasts. So really it's all, the sky's the limit. Counseling is what a lot of people go into psychology for. A lot of people come out of psychology loving lots of other things as well. So it's really broad in that sense. As well, the main draw is that intra-work placement. Now, that's something that not a lot of psychology courses in Ireland have. As far as I'm aware, the only other course that would have that would be psychology in Limerick. But that may not necessarily be realistic for you. So I'm after seeing a question in the chat. I'll just finish up talking about intra and then I'll answer that one. So intra is one of the main draws. It's an accredited work placement, which is incredibly useful in a very competitive field. Psychology is very competitive. It is, in some respects. In other respects, it's actually quite easy because you have a degree that says you know how to work with people, so you can get into a lot of different kind of areas in that sense. But this work placement is genuinely great. You get to go into lots of different settings. So I know people who are going into Temple Street Hospital who are working there as part of different departments, coming into schools, helping education psychologists with like diagnosing children and things like that. Currently, I am in my work placement, which does counselling and different therapies. So there's lots to kind of do with that work placement. DCU has different partnerships, so they'll really help you out with getting that. And it's all a part of your course. If there's a placement that you're really interested in, but you don't get the chance to do, or that you don't see DCU has a partnership with a company, you can reach out to that company and try and organize your own work placement. So that's genuinely great. I'll just check that question now. Could you give an example of when we would see the use of math in this course? Absolutely. So the main example would be statistics. Statistics is something that not a lot of people expect when it comes to psychology, but it can be a part of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be after you graduate, if it turns out not to be your favorite part of the course. But lots of times when you're doing research and things, you want to try and find numeric kind of values for different things. So if you're looking at, say, like how caffeine could affect your performance on like doing some test, you might do an experiment where like you have participants take caffeine and then you kind of doing the test before taking the caffeine, how they do on a test, or versus after they take caffeine and see how that goes. The statistics can seem intimidating to a lot of people, but it never gets too bad. The people in DCU, the staff, are very friendly. They will go over everything right from the start and really make sure that you get a good basis. It'll go from things as simple as mean, mode, and median right from the start. They don't assume you know anything off your leaving cert or anything like that. So it's totally okay if maths is not your strong suit. There's also plenty of support in DCU, such as like the Maths Help Centre, which essentially gives free maths grinds if that is in any way anything you're worried about. So after all that, we kind of get to answer what exactly is psychology. So it's the scientific study of human mind and behavior, how we think, how we act, react, and interact, both individually and groups. So you get to learn a lot about people, essentially. The two kind of things here that often catches people off guard is the scientific aspect and the behavior aspect. So we say scientific because we try to actually measure what we can, as close to being objective as possible, which is important, and behavior. So we like to look at how whether people's smile is actually indicative of like whether they're happy and things like that. So why would you study psychology? As we kind of mentioned before, it's useful in a variety of settings. Any job where there is people, there are psychologists. These are some of the main ones here: sports psychology, counseling, education settings, and business kind of settings. There's also plenty more in crime, healthcare, science communication, journalism, things like that. There's absolutely tons of psychology in any area you're interested in. So if you're almost even balancing between like whether you want to go and do business studies or whether you want to do psychology, psychology can be a great way to kind of have a unique selling point as opposed to doing business, while still going the same kind of route. So these are kind of the 5 kind of pillars of what you'd be learning within the course. So lifespan development, how people grow up, differences between like children and adults, cognitive, the different kind of mental processes like language and memory that people use. There's a biological pillar behind that, the different kind of chemistry and things underneath that. Important to note with biology, a lot of people wonder if you need it to do psychology. You don't. I did not do it for secondary school, but it's useful to have, but you don't need it whatsoever. You can absolutely learn it from scratch in college, if that's anyway something you're ever worried about. Individual differences, how come some people, some twins, for example, one might grow up and become an engineer, one might grow up and become a psychologist. What exactly made it so that these two differed? And then social situations, how different groups and things can affect the way we act. So there's absolutely tons of reasons why you might choose to study psychology, and it's all completely down to your interest. So I'll leave those up there for you to just read for a minute. But there's absolutely tons of different ways that you can do psychology. Now, once you have a psychology degree, and this applies to psychology degrees across Ireland, so even if you're not thinking of going to DCU, it's just important to keep these in mind. A psychology degree is useful for a wide variety of settings, but it is important to note that in order to work as a counsellor or as an educational psychologist, you do typically need, you do actually always need an additional qualification on top of that, be it a master's degree or a PhD. It is a competitive field, so it is important to note that when going in. it can be a bit of a long road sometimes. That's not to discourage you in any way. It's very employable in other areas. A lot of people would do this and then go into social work or business kind of areas. It's just important to note that it may not always be right away working as a counselor and making lots of money. So is this course for you? If you can read these and think to yourself, yes, absolutely, then it's for you. The two other courses I'll go through a little bit more quickly. They're largely the same kind of thing. They just have an additional maths and additional disruptive technologies component. So they're both 4 years as well. We'll talk about psychology and maths first. So the only main difference here is, first of all, it doesn't have the PSI accreditation just yet, but it will soon. Most likely, by the time you graduate, you will have it. And then, as well, it's important to note that the program so similar again, it has a much lower intake of students, only about 10 per year, but it is 4 years as well, and it has that work placement in year 3, which is always valuable. So the course is generally split half and half between psychology and maths. So you'll do a lot of the same psychology modules, from like social psychology to cognition to introduction to psychology, all those different things. But you'll also take on different maths modules such as statistics, probability, calculus, algebra, and coding as well, which is actually a really useful skill in a variety of fields. Where can you go from there? In a lot of ways, you can actually do a lot of the same things you can do at a psychology degree, except you also can do a lot of things you can do at a maths degree. So if you want to go into computers, markets, any sort of analysis kind of jobs, be it market or sales or finances, whatever it may be, you have a very very diverse degree with a lot of different specialisms you can go into. So again, if you can look at this and say, yeah, this is for me, then I'd 100% recommend putting down psychology and maths on your CAO. So now we'll just go over psychology and disruptive technologies briefly. And then if you guys have any questions, I will try and answer a few before we have to go. So once again, it's 4 years. The PSI accreditation is pending to graduate. But important to note, back again to a minimum of 04 or H6 in maths. So you do not need a H3 for this one. So, sorry. Cool. So this is once again 10 students roughly per year. It has that work placement in third year, which is always very helpful. And you do a final year research project in psychology and disruptive technologies. I've realized that we haven't actually said what disruptive technologies are, which may confuse some people. It is essentially computer science, which is really genuinely cool. So you get to learn lots of different coding languages, things like that, compete in hackathons that DCU organizes, which can be great ways to boost your experience in computer science fields. And yeah, what will you learn to do with DCU? So you complete that placement. You can do various placements in hospitals, industry, and tech. There's people who've worked with Google in DCU. There's people who've worked with like tons of different companies that work in IT, tons of different research options, learn about AI, social robotics, and more. DCU has a VR lab, as well as the psychology department having its own VR headsets and things. If you want to learn about the different links between your brain and VR and things like that, you can do this in this course, and add micro modules to your academic transcript. So what can you do from there? So once again, you can go on further into a psychology specialism, but as well, you can 100% go into tons of different careers in business and computers in a diverse range of areas. This is the last one. If you can look at these and say, yeah, this is something that I want to do, then 100% put it down in your CAO. It's really worth considering. So, yeah, there's tons of transversal skills. So even if you go into any of these courses and realize maybe it's not exactly for you, you have so many skills gained that you can apply in a number of diverse settings. So they're definitely worth considering. And just a brief little overview of some of the services here in DCU. There's tons of academic supports. There's tons of personal supports. There's free counseling in DCU. Clubs and societies, there's over 140 currently where you can get involved. There's a union module in all four of these, in all three of these psychology courses in the fourth year, which is an extra accredited module, which acknowledges your extracurricular things. So whether you do a different hobby on the side, you can get that kind of acknowledged. And yeah, I'll answer any questions you guys have now. And if you have any questions after the fact that you think of, there is a chat to me button on the psychology undergraduate course page, which I would 100% recommend checking out if you have any questions afterwards. Even if I don't know the answer, I can find out for you. Or you can email some of the program coordinators here, which are the lecturers. Is it possible to begin the course before September if taking it online? And if I know about the distance learning course, online course, could I give a brief rundown? To be honest, I'm not actually very familiar with that at all. So I'm not going to try and answer that. I'm pretty certain the answer to the first one is probably no. But I couldn't say for certain. So I would recommend messaging me on that psychology undergraduate page. And even though I don't know for certain right now, I can find that out for you. Jim might also know the answer, who is typing in the chat. Elena, how many hours of work placement are there in psychology year 3? Also, is there a neuropsychology option for a master? Great questions. So there are 3 months of work placement in psychology year 3, the entirety of second semester. So yeah, that is 3 months. It is 20 hours a week in different settings. Hope that helps. And as well, there is a master's. I can't quite remember where it is. DCU does not currently offer a neuropsychology master's. The master's in psychology in DCU is a well-being master's, so it's kind of in the health psychology range. Yeah, I hope that helps. DCU does not currently offer it, but there is a neuropsychology master. I believe also in Dublin, but I'm not entirely sure. are there any alternative entry pathways? So there are currently not particularly. The main two that people would think of would be either as a mature student or through a PLC. Also, thank you, Jim. So PLC, there's currently no way to get into psychology and DCU through that. It's one of the few courses in DCU that you currently cannot get in through with a PLC. They're currently trying to work on that, but it just currently isn't in place. And I'm not too sure if there are many other entryways in other psychology courses through a PLC, but it's worth checking out. And then mature students you can get in through, which may not be what you're thinking, but if you're 23 years or above, you can go through the mature student entry pathway, which involves a CV and an interview, and it's more akin to a job kind of interview, but there's a certain number of placements allocated for that. Thank you guys for hopping on. I hope I answered some of your questions, and if not, check. You can message me later using the Unibuddy platform. Thanks, guys.